Now, my enough number, it's somewhere between the comfortable metro life and the aspirational city life. And my enough number is 8 CR. My monthly expense is around 1.2 L. So the additional buffer that I have is for my own safety because this number just makes me feel better. Hello, everyone. So this is probably the most commonly asked question, that how much money do you really need? A lot of people are now becoming aware about the option of retiring early, and they're thinking about what's the amount that I would need to stop working or to stop being forced to work. And in this video, I'm going to share the truth about financial freedom. At least from my perspective, this is how I think about financial freedom. Now, there are a lot of these calculations of financial freedom numbers, and they are all based on the safe withdrawal rate. And this is the percentage withdrawal rate at which you can keep withdrawing money and you will never run out of money. So you have a corpus one time, you keep that into investments. And as per the FIRE movement, for example, they say that if you keep withdrawing at a 4% withdrawal rate, you'll be safe, which means that you will always have that corpus. Now, this comes from the US and may not apply to India, and we'll explore what we need to do to adjust for that. The second thing, they say just having these many crores is enough. So you just think about the corpus. If you have this corpus, then you are set, then you can retire. The third is this expense multiplier. And all of these are actually the same mathematical concepts. You must have heard that if you multiply your annual expenses by 25, which essentially just means the 4% safe withdrawal rate, you will be safe to retire. Let's start with the standard FIRE formula. Now, this is whatever your monthly expenses are, multiply them by 12. So you end up with your annual expense, and then multiply that by 25, which is basically the same thing as 4% withdrawal rate. So that 4% should be your annual expense. And if that 4% is your annual expense, you can just retire today. Now, again, this is what the FIRE community is based on, right? So, for example, if your expenses every month is 1 lakh rupees, the corpus that you need is 1 lakh multiplied by 12, which is your annual expense, multiplied by 25, which is the standard FIRE formula, and you end up with 3 crores. Now, imagine if someone is spending 1 lakh rupees today in their 30s, and you ask them to retire with 3 crores, they may or may not feel comfortable. Maybe they're yet to get married. Maybe they're yet to have children. Maybe in the next 10 years, they want to buy a supercar. I don't know, like different people have different aspirations. But if they are willing to really live below their means, and that's what typically I see in the FIRE community as well, most of them are happy to live below their means, then this formula may actually work out for them, especially if they can adjust it a little bit to the Indian context. So the standard US-based FIRE formula is 25x. In India, financial planners advise like 30x or 35x. There's also like situations where they say 40x. And if you calculate the same 1 lakh multiplied by 12 multiplied by 30, you end up with a 3.6 CR. And 1 multiplied by 12 multiplied by 35, you end up with a 4.2. So the range we are looking at is anywhere from 3 crores for the standard formula to 3.6 to 4.2, right? Now, these are the key issues with this calculation. The first one is FIRE, financial independence, retire early, is often like clubbed together. The goal seems to be to retire early, which as per me can reduce the meaning of life, right? So work also gives us meaning, like we drive meaning from work. Also, it was built for the US, for the taxes there, for the returns, the retirement benefits, the healthcare. The fabric of the society itself is very different in the US. And then the lifestyle and expenses will actually change over time. So you cannot always say that I will always be spending 1 lakh a month. And some people say, okay, I'm just going to add a buffer. Maybe I'm going to say 1.2 lakhs. But there are certain changes that can happen in life that can completely transform these expenses. And in a good way as well. Maybe you have a child and you didn't plan for it. That could increase your expenses. So those are the things to be careful of. So typically the considerations that we see in India, which may not exist in a market like the US, is definitely low social support for early retirement. Early retirement is a new concept in India. Now people are becoming aware in their 30s and so forth. But there are longer family dependencies in India as well. Children are supporting their parents or in-laws in India, which may not be the case in the US. There's also this imbalance between real estate ownership versus rental yield. So the cost of real estate in India is super high, while the rental yield is super low. And for emotional reasons, people want to buy real estate in India. So if they will anyway buy real estate and they're not going to get a good rental yield on that, We have to take that into consideration as well. And finally, there's healthcare, inflation, lack of government safety nets, which is something that you can be more comfortable in the West and in certain parts of the world where it's taken care of for you. So those are some specific things we need to look at. Now, in terms of inflation in India has averaged around 6%, which means the cost of living doubles every 12 years. And the returns in Indian markets have averaged around 12%, which is actually decent. If you were to think of the formula in India, you can adapt to the social considerations and try to come up with sort of your own safe withdrawal rate. And typically we see three bands. We see a 4% band. We see people recommending a 3.5% band and a 3% band. So let's keep the 1 lakh example. And then let's use these three different bands and see what we come up with. So if we see a 12 lakhs at a 4% withdrawal rate, we'll end up with a 3 crore. We see a 12 lakhs at a 3.5% safe withdrawal rate, it's 3.43. And at a 3%, it's 4 CR. This is another way of doing the same calculation. Some people talk about the monthly multiplier. So it's like take your monthly expenses, which is in this case 1 lakh, multiply it by 300, you end up with 3 crores. Multiplied by 343, which is the approximate at a 3.5% safe withdrawal rate, you come up with a 3.43 CR. Multiplied by 400, you come up with a 4 CR, right? So different tiers, and you can start to see what kind of numbers you will feel more comfortable with when you take your monthly expense and start multiplying it. So let's take the middle way, 3.5%, and then calculate at different monthly expenses. So let's say your monthly expense is 50,000. Again, keep in mind that it may not stay at 50,000 forever, but let's say it's at 50,000. Annual expense is around 6 lakhs. Your corpus needed at a 3.5% safe withdrawal rate will be around 1.71 CR. So there are people who actually can retire early at 1 to 2 crores as per this calculation. The second is 1 lakh. We've already seen this at a 3.5%. It's 3.43 CR. If you keep spending 1 lakh a month and don't go above that, of course, you can keep an emergency buffer to go above that, or you can have some separate investments that cater to specific goals like children's education, buying a car, etc. And then you can retire at a 3.43 CR at a 3.5% safe withdrawal rate. Again, this is not something I'm recommending. I'm just showing you the calculations that are out there. Then there's the example where the monthly expense is around 1.5, and then you can retire at like a 5.14 CR at a 3.5%. Now, the problem with this is one thing that we are not considering is what's your current life situation and how old are you specifically, right? So if you're in your 20s, you can say my monthly expenses is 50,000, maybe you're single. But in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe your monthly expenses are going to go up to 1.5. So if you decide to retire now at 1.71 CR, life is going to throw a lot of challenges at you because your actual number might have been 5.14 CR, but you retired early at 1.71 CR, and after a few years, you realize the market doesn't need you anymore. So I'll give you the same calculation for my monthly expense as well. So my monthly expense is 1.2 lakhs a month. At a 4%, I need 3.6 CR. At a 3.5%, I need a 4 CR. At a 3%, 4.8 CR. Now, there are problems with all of these calculations as well. The most important thing which I pointed out is the number will change with time. Like I said, if you're in your 20s, you can manage in an under 50,000 expense. But if you choose to retire now, you will not be able to sustain your family as you grow older. Applying a flat percentage doesn't really reflect the reality of things, right? So let's talk about the age-based strategy. If you're younger, then maybe you need a conservative approach. Maybe you need like a safe withdrawal rate of 3% because you're going to see more years in your life. You're going to see more volatility. You're going to see a higher inflation, lifestyle changes. So example, 1.5 lakhs a month. Then you need a 6 crores if you're, let's say, in your 30s. But if you're in your 40s, at a 1.5 lakhs, you can consider a 4% because now you have a shorter time horizon. Maybe you already have kids. Then it comes down to 4.5. So this could work as well. But then you might ask, what do I do? So I personally don't follow either of these strategies. For me, honestly, it's not even about retiring early. So I sometimes feel that the FI and the RE terms should be separate from each other. There's a lot of people who may not want retirement, but can still benefit from having financial freedom. And there's a lot of people who just want to retire because they don't enjoy the kind of work they're doing. So they may benefit from a better work profile. They may benefit from chasing their passion more than the financial freedom part. So it doesn't necessarily need to go together. I think they're just forced to go together. Even if you read the acronym financial independence, retire early, it seems like someone just tried to squeeze in two different concepts together. So I think life is not about like early retirement, but maybe finding work that you're passionate about and being able to work whenever you want to work on your own terms. So life is not static things. And I think there's also an emotional aspect that I have with a certain number, that if I have this amount in my corpus, I just feel emotionally better. It's not just math, but if I have this much, then I'll feel more comfortable. So that's my special case. And also, everyone is unique. Not everyone has the same life. So, for example, in my case, I live in Vietnam. The inflation is lower here. It's more stable. It doesn't change as much as it does in India. Also, I invest in India, so India has an edge in the equity returns. My income has been in USD, so that gives me the arbitrage advantage. I keep that money in USD, which against the INR, if you look at the data, it has given me better returns just by keeping the money in USD, right? So my case is special. It's unique. I don't say that I have certain benefits. Of course, I made a special choice in everything I've done. I've made a conscious choice and decision to live here in Vietnam. And I've made a video about how I live here, the day in my life, so that you can get an idea of how I live. I've also made a decision to invest most of my money in the Indian equity. I've also made a decision to work with US businesses and US clients. The other thing, which is more important, is that I don't want to retire early. I don't wish to retire early, but I do wish to take a break whenever I want. So right now, this year, I'm not taking any active projects. I don't have active income this year. And the reason is because my children are small, they need me right now, and I just don't feel like taking up new projects this year, right? So this is optionality. This is not retirement. I prefer this optionality over retirement. And that's because I have enough. I don't have a fire number, but I have enough, right? So that's my definition. I define my enough number, and I define it based on feeling, not just the math. My enough number, let me disclose this. It's 8 crores at 1.2 lakhs monthly spend. This is how much we spend living here in Vietnam. We have 2 children, so it's a family of 4, and we spend 1.2 lakhs a month. I've made a separate video about my cost of living, so you can look at that video to understand like different categories in which we spend money and how much we spend in each category. But this is based on my lifestyle and expenses, right? So my enough number journey has been covered in another video, which is like a 0.0 to 8 crore video, where I've covered my entire net worth growth. I started tracking in 2017 from 12 lakh rupees, and I've tracked my net worth every single month since then. So that will give you an idea of how I made the money, the business that I run, the agency that I run, the kind of clients that I've worked with, and how I've grown this income with different revenue streams. In terms of how I've designed my portfolio of this HCR, 53% of that is equity, which is mostly in the Indian market, which is mostly in index funds. And then I have real estate, which is only in Vietnam. 21% of that. I have 2 apartments here in Vietnam for rental income. One of them I live in, and one is for rental income. Then I have a little bit of gold cash business account, which is in Singapore, so I can hold USD there. That money in my business account is also sitting in the NASDAQ 100, so it gets returns, right? In terms of my portfolio in India, you can see that the current value is close to 5 CR. I've disclosed the entire portfolio in many of my videos, so I'm not going to deep dive into my portfolio. But you can see that the top 3 holdings, which matter the most, I feel, are the Midcap 150 index, the Next 50, and the Nifty 50. So I'm a very boring investor, very passive investor. And these might as well be index funds, but just in my case, I have invested through ETFs. And that's the amount that I've invested in these 3 different indices. Now, let's talk about what has happened after I've hit enough. So the first thing is I've said no to active client work. I've started a slow coffee brand. I've also started a small coffee shop here in South Vietnam, and I have more time to create content and share my learnings, share my journey. My calendar is completely open. I don't have anything scheduled on my calendar. So I now can choose intentionally how I spend my time, right? So this is how I think about the difference between fire and enough. Like, this is a mindset thing. But I feel anything you want to learn, anything you want to do, you have to start with the mindset. If you blindly follow numbers and calculations and formulas and content creators, and I know that a lot of you get instant gratification when you see, oh, this is the money that you need. You need 5 crores. If someone says you need 5 crores, you have the instant gratification, but it doesn't make any sense. Because the mindset is not clear. The mindset of fire is never work again. The mindset of enough is to have peace of mind. The mindset of fire is never needing to earn. The mindset of enough is not being forced to earn. These mindset differences are very subtle, but they define the way you live your life. Also, if you hit a number, but your mindset is not clear, you may not be happy when you hit your number. So the satisfaction that comes with having a clear mindset, I feel, outweighs the actual number. So how do you find your enough number? The first step is to define your lifestyle anchors. And there's basically going to be these 4 categories. these are the most important categories I've come across. I've spoken to people, I've seen reports. Housing, your family size and responsibilities, your health and emergencies, and what do you like to spend your money on outside of your needs? Let's define it as that. So housing, a lot of people choose to rent. A lot of people decide to own. Maybe that's for emotional reasons or for security that people feel when they own a house. The debate of whether you should rent or own is useless as per me, because at the end people will make that decision very emotionally. If you were to give people all of the math and all of the data of rental yields and everything, they will still ignore all of that and still make an emotional decision about the house. I, for example, didn't get into that kind of debate at all, because I bought my apartment in Vietnam and the rental yield here, especially in Vung Tau city where I live, is pretty good. So I just bought it. It gives me safety, it gives me security, it also gives me a good rental yield versus in a place like India. So for me, the decision was very clear. I try to make decisions that are supported by both data and emotions. So I avoid making a decision which is either too much on the data side or too much on the emotional side, because if you be somewhere in the middle, I think you will see the best benefits from that. Now, in terms of tier one, tier two, again, this is a completely personal decision. Some people like the big city life, some people don't. So, of course, it's going to benefit you if you try to go outside the cities. If you need a big city to thrive, to feel good, then maybe that's what you need. Family size and responsibilities. How many children do you have? That's the biggest question, I think, these days. The type of school that you want to send them to. Are you supporting your parents, your in-laws, and so forth? Health and emergencies, definitely would recommend everyone get some insurance. Emergency buffer, keep your 1 year emergency buffer separate. There's also different buckets of emergency buffers that you can create. So you can create emergency buffers for different kinds of people in your family, different kinds of goals. And then finally, do you want basic comfort or do you want an aspirational life? So your discretionary living expenses is your fourth bucket. So do you want a local holiday or do you want a global travel every 4 months, every year, maybe an international trip? You can define those frequencies as well. Next, we're going to look at references. I've put together different ranges and I've put 3 columns. So the first one is your lifestyle band and life stage. And then the second one is your monthly spend. So you have to look at both your life stage and your monthly spend. And you could be moving from one life stage to another. So remember that this is not a fixed number. And finally, the third column is your corpus. If you already know where you are in these, it'll be much easier for you to visualize the kind of corpus you need. So let's say first is simple life, like the solo life or a simple family life. In tier 2 city, there are a lot of people in India who actually live under 25,000 expenses with a family of 2. But I'm not speaking to those people because they are not here on my channel based on the kind of audience that watches me. Typically, let's say a monthly spend of 40K to 70K. And then the corpus needed 1.25 crores to 2.5 crores, right? So giving you a range so that you can visualize. Now, if you're single, you're in this range, this is not the corpus you need. You probably need somewhere where you will fall later in your life stage. But if you have decided for some reason that you're going to be solo, always live in a tier 2 city, outside the big cities, always live a simple life, then yes, probably this is a safe range for you. Yes, it's very practical for people to retire in 1.25 to 2.5 CR. If they're going to be living in a low cost city or a town, it is possible in India to do this. Probably one of the fewer countries where you could do this. The second is modest urban life, right? So double income, no kids, or small family with support. Monthly expense, let's say between 70,000 to 1.2 lakhs. Again, see if you fit here. But if you're, let's say, double income, no kids, and then you decide to have a child, you might want to change your band again. The corpus needed is going to be 2.5 CR to 4 CR. Now, comfortable metro life, 1 to 2 kids, working couple, domestic travel. So that's the fourth category. I've considered domestic travel here. Let's say they're spending between 1.2 lakhs to 2 lakhs. Again, the travel is not every month, but we've considered the average of the monthly spends. Then you're looking at a 4 CR to a 7 CR kind of a corpus, right? So the next category is the aspirational city life. So now you are, 2 kids, car, house, international travel. You like all of those upgrades. You like the add-ons and everything, all the toppings on your drinks. So that's like 2 lakhs to 3.5 lakhs of monthly spend. And we're looking at a corpus needed of around 7 CR to 10 CR. Now, my enough number that I've calculated is not based on this band, but it's somewhere between the comfortable metro life and the aspirational city life. I'm somewhere in between that range, and my enough number is 8 CR. My monthly expense is around 1.2 L. So the additional buffer that I have is for my own safety, because this number just makes me feel better. Now I'm honest about this, that my calculation is this math plus an emotion. I don't have to do everything by a formula, right? So this is just how I feel better. And with that 8 CR, I just feel great. And this is just how I've calculated, and I've added a buffer for my own mental well-being, if I can put it that way. Whatever you think is best for you, add that buffer if that makes you feel comfortable. But this kind of math is based on the monthly spend and the kind of lifestyle that people live. Finally, there's this abundant, rich life. They could spend anything above 3L a month, and they would need anything above 10 CR. And there are these people who go out and create content about why anything less than 10 CR is not going to work in India, because they just splurge all of their money, right? And it's possible to do that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If you are that person, then, there's no number that could be recommended. There's even reports from the richest people in the world who said they could have made a little bit more. So there's no end to how much you can spend, how much you need to make. So I wouldn't really go into that discussion. But one more point I do want to say is that if you are not sure where you fall, then you should likely prepare for a 10 CR as well, because the first step is to try to find which band you fall in. That's the most important thing. If you don't know where you fall, and if your aspirations are endless, then you would need endless amounts of money. And I'm not saying you cannot make it. You have the potential, you can make that money, you can create value in the world and create more income based on that. But then you should prepare for the last band. If you don't know where you fall, you probably should be preparing for your last band, right? So that's a reference. Again, one more note is I'm not going to stop at my 8 CR. My money is going to continue to compound. I'm just not obsessed about it. I know that eventually it'll grow to 100 CR as well, whether it's with me or with my kids or whatever, that doesn't matter. But if it keeps compounding, and I've made a separate video on how I'm going to hit that 100 CR mark as well. But that's not because I have a splurging habit or an aspirational life. That's just because I know how the math works, and now it's a game for me. Now it's enough, but I am playing a game. Now I'm not waiting for an enough number, right? So final section of this video. If you like all of this insight, then please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications. I'll keep creating more content. I have a lot of videos on my investment portfolio as well, which is actually quite simple. So once you watch a few, you'll understand my overall investing philosophy as well. My goal here in this channel is just to share my journey. I just document my journey, and I don't recommend specific things to people. So whatever works for you best, do that, do your research. But one thing I do want to say about adapting to change, which I've learned from my own journey, is that, your lifestyle could change, your aspirations could shift. Inflation keeps changing. So just remember that enough is not a number. It's a mindset that you need to develop and a system that you need to develop. I personally don't create any active income this year. For example, like I said, I'm taking a break, but I keep planning for passive income. I keep planning for alternative revenue streams. I've also made a video on this channel on how much money I made in 2024 and broken down all of the revenue streams that I have. So keep that in mind, that if you find what you're passionate about, you can always keep working on projects. And I think a lot of people go ahead and start commenting about inflation and this and that, and focus a lot on things that they cannot control. But what I think is that you should just focus on becoming a person of skills and value, because you can exchange that value for money at any point of time. Keep learning, keep improving, instead of complaining on things that are outside your circle of control. So that'll be my last message. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.